Today's episode is about something that goes deeper than logos and colors. It's about the soul of your brand. I'm joined by Nicole Brown, founder of Inspirati, a branding agency that helps businesses create meaningful brand identities and stand out websites that feel true to who they are. Laura has worked around the globe, crafting marketing strategies in everything from petrochemicals to cardiology. With a master's in international marketing and years of experience behind her, Laura brings a strategic yet soulful approach to branding that really stood out to me, and we had a great conversation. In our conversation, we covered why branding matters more than ever, the difference between branding and marketing, and why that matters, what to focus on when you're just starting out, why picking your right brand color actually impacts how people perceive you, and her top advice when it comes to brand on your website. Whether you're building your business from scratch or building a much needed refresh, this episode is packed with insights that will help you show up more confidently and consistently online. Welcome to the E-commerce Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Saunders. When we started this business, all I had was a couch, a laptop, and a 9-month-old. My main goal? To help others. Now, with over 20 years in the e-commerce building industry and even more than that in web development, I have seen a lot. I love breaking down the hard tech into easily understandable bits to help others be successful in their online business. Whether you're a seasoned e-commerce veteran or just starting out, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of e-commerce together. Welcome back to the show. Today we have a special guest with us, and her name is Nicole Brown. She is a branding expert and agency that helps organizations discover their soul so they can create a meaningful brand identity and a distinctive website that really sets them apart. So welcome to the show today, Laura.
Yeah, great to be here, Carrie. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, I just gave a little brief summary of who you are, but tell us a little bit more about who Laura is.
Yeah, so basically, I've got a branding agency called Inspirati, and it's all about helping organizations discover the soul of their brand so they can create really meaningful brand identity that really sets them apart. And it kind of comes from my background. So basically, I studied international marketing at university. And that kind of led me to have marketing career in marketing, initially in the corporate world. So I was working in specifically publishing, but I've worked in all different countries in Slovakia, Singapore, Argentina, London. And basically I was advising global marketing strategies in a whole range of different industries, generally quite technical industries. So things like supply chains, cardiology, petrochemicals. But basically that's kind of my background, is really working in the marketing space, in the global marketing space, and helping create marketing strategies. But ultimately I kind of got to the point where I wasn't really excited about what I was doing anymore. And I wanted to have more control over, the work I did, and wanted to feel more inspired by what I was doing. So I set up my own company, which is, as I've mentioned, Inspirati, and yeah, that's what I'm doing now. So yeah.
I love that. I love that you followed your heart. You got the experience you needed under your belt, but then you gave yourself permission of this isn't singing to me anymore. It isn't singing to my heart. It isn't making me happy. So you decided to start your own business to help other businesses with their branding and their marketing.
Yeah. I think it's like one of those things. It's so it's not easy to move away when you've been in a corporate career with, a comfy salary and benefits and things. But I think it does grate at you for so long, and you can't you can't keep up, you can't keep doing it. It pushes you too much, and you're like, I just need to try this and see if it can work.
Yeah, I think many of us have that bug that we need to like be our own boss and make a bigger difference in the world. So
Yeah.
speaking of bigger differences, and I know this, I know branding matters a lot, but I want to hear from you. Like, why does branding matter? What in your words, like, what is the big deal about making sure that your branding is on point?
Yeah, so there are many different things, to be honest with you. There are many different things to think about here. I'm going to kind of set it down to a few different points here, really, just to kind of summarize. So the first thing is having, a solid branding really helps set the right tone for your business. So having this right like, tone, right mood for your business really helps you reach the ideal client, because you're going to attract the kind of people that resonate with that kind of mood and that kind of tone. Secondly, having consistent representation improves recognition. So branding helps you be consistent, and that really improves your recognition. And this really helps you become more memorable, which obviously, who doesn't want to be memorable? Who doesn't want to stand out in today's world? We're just seeing so many adverts and so many, so much marketing. And the final thing I'll mention is that branding helps you build authenticity and credibility. So this is so important today. We always hear, this know, like, and trust. People want to get to know people behind the business. They want to get to know the brand. What is the purpose behind it, and all these sorts of things. And that's so important today. People really want to, feel that they're dealing with businesses that are authentic, they're credible. And ultimately, this is important because it helps build trust. And we all know that trust is absolutely crucial for sales. So ultimately, I kind of summarize these three things. Ultimately, they help you get customers. And it's not as simple as, if you do like a marketing campaign and you get some customers, it is a long-term strategy. So obviously you need to do this over the long term to get the benefits from it. But ultimately, it's so important to, building your audience, getting customers, these elements of branding. So yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And we talk a lot about customer trust on the podcast. So that really just brings another angle, another way to further enhance that customer trust. I love how you explained it like that, because it really is true. If we have a consistent branding and we have all of that behind our marketing efforts too, then that really helps us be recognized and trusted. And speaking of marketing, I know a lot of people get confused between the two words, what the difference is between branding versus marketing. So can you explain a little bit more about the difference between branding and marketing?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely right. A lot of people do get confused with these two terms, and it's understandable because there's a lot of interconnections between them. There's a lot of similarities, and I think people just never really understand really what each one means properly. But I will briefly outline this. So basically, marketing is all about, promoting a product or service, marketing campaigns to promote product or service. Whereas branding is really about shaping your brand, shaping who you are, the kind of image you want to put out there, and the kind of perception that people have of you. So it's actually quite different. And you need different strategies for both of them. And you'd have different goals and different results from both of them. So they are actually quite distinct. And some of the ways, I'll kind of like summarize a few of the ways that kind of make them different. So for example, when we think about marketing, it's about getting people's attention. Want to get people's attention with a video on social media. That's the kind of thing we're doing. Whereas branding is more about keeping people's attention, maintaining their attention, maintaining their interest, so they're loyal, so they, drives loyalty. So related to that, marketing is about driving sales. So you have a marketing campaign, you get some sales off the back of it. Whereas branding is more about this long-term, as I mentioned earlier, this long-term perception of driving recognition, driving loyalty over the long term, not just an immediate, let's just get some sales. And the other thing that a lot of people, don't actually consider, and I do see a lot of people make this mistake, is, branding always comes first, marketing comes afterwards. Branding is really essential foundation to marketing. And the other thing is, marketing is like this very short-term kind of element. You do a marketing campaign, it's a short-term thing. Whereas branding is more of you set it and it's not permanent. Obviously you can adjust it, but you don't want to be changing your branding every month. It needs to have an element of consistency around it. Whereas marketing, you create different marketing campaigns all the time, and that's probably a good thing. But branding is more, the value lies in the being consistent and, continuing to put that, same image out there, so people can build trust with you.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I was going to actually ask you as you were talking, one of the questions I thought of was, So branding is more like the foundation to your marketing then. Would you say that would be a pretty accurate way to say it? Because I feel like you touched on that at the end of
Yeah.
your answer, but you need the branding first to do
Yes.
marketing effectively, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I absolutely agree with that. That's a really good point. Branding, I do feel that branding, it sets the foundation for all the marketing that you do. So if you don't have branding, it's very difficult to do a good marketing, because you've not really got clarity on who is the brand, what are we putting out there when we're sharing stuff on social media or on your website or whatever mediums you're using. What kind of image are you trying to present? Who are you trying to connect with? And those are all things that having a solid brand really gives you clarity on those kind of things. So I do think it is really, really important, to really have that solid branding foundation. I think it sets the foundation for everything you do, really, in your marketing, like I said.
So then, and this is kind of a question I've got in my mind as far as like for our business, we've been around over 22 years. And when we started the business, there wasn't much talk about branding, and you really didn't need to market much because, this is early 2000s. And so one thing I know I struggle with, and I'm not sure any of the other listeners struggle with, is, we've been around for a very long time and we have had more of a team type of a business where I was only a solopreneur for maybe a year or two. It was very quickly before I started hiring people. And so I get that I hesitate, and I don't know if others hesitate on putting my personality into my brand. Would you say putting a personality into a brand is a really good idea to help you stand out then for those that might be hesitating like me to put our
Yeah,
personality into our brand?
that's a really good point, Carrie. I do absolutely think it's really important to put your personality into your brand. And this is the important point you brought up, actually. You can put your personality into your brand, obviously, as a person, like you're the owner of the business and you're putting your personality into it that way, which is obviously a really great way because people connect with people. It really builds that know, like, and trust. But if you're like a business brand rather than a personal brand, like your business is, you can also kind of create a personality around the company in addition to your own personal brand. So like your company, you might think, is my company friendly? Is it supportive? Is it serious? And you think about different types of industries, if you think about something like the legal industry, it's probably got a more serious tone than something like, I was trying to think of something more fun, like a creative industry. It's probably got more of a kind of, creative vibe. So you can add personality, obviously through your own personality, but also through, you can kind of construct personality for the actual business itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so let's flip that a little bit then. So we talked about maybe some established businesses like ours, but then what about those that are listening who are new businesses just starting out? How much do they invest in branding versus other areas like building up their product or service development or marketing?
Yeah, so this is a really important thing, and I think a lot of new businesses really struggle when starting out, knowing what to focus on, knowing what to invest in, and it can seem incredibly difficult. And I know that from, obviously, I'm sure you know that, obviously, from having that own experience of being there, that it does seem like you're pressured to invest lots of time and money in many different things, and it's where do you put that attention? So I think that branding is one of the first things you should invest in. And the reason for that kind of links back to what we discussed earlier. And it really sets the foundation for everything that you do in your business. So it sets the foundation for your marketing. So often, I speak to a lot of business owners and people new in business as well. And a lot of the time they want to jump into doing something very tangible, like creating a website, creating a logo, creating content for social media, or very tangible things that feels like we're doing something. And those things are very important. I'm not going to say that they're not important, because they are. What I'd say is all these things, to actually be effective, they need to have a strategy behind it. They need to have a kind of a purpose behind it. Like, why are we creating content on social media? What's the purpose? What are we trying to get out of that? And I think branding really sets that strategy, it sets that foundation that makes it not only more effective, but also easier for you to create content. So you're not spending as much time because you kind of know this is what I want to put out there, this is what's relevant, and this is what's going to convert. So my advice is really, with the branding, start with the branding, and also really take time, not just thinking about starting, right, we need to create a logo, a color palette, those sorts of things, which obviously is important. But even before you get there, thinking about getting clarity around really important questions around the business. So it's really about having a strategy around your brand before creating anything tangible, as I said. So, things you might want to think about: what kind of image do you want to communicate? Who are you creating this brand for? What kind of people do you want to attract? And, and what makes you different is another important question. But really, the essential point is you need to really set solid foundations to really make sure that what you create will be effective. And, once you've set those foundations, then obviously you can go, create a visual identity for your brand, create a website, create social media profiles, all those things that are really going to attract your ideal client and obviously help you build your business.
Well, and I know many times when people are thinking about building their brand too, they think about brand colors. I feel like that's the first thing that comes to their mind is like brand colors. And I know a little bit about the psychology behind colors, but I know you know even more than I do. So why does picking the right brand colors really matter? Is that just, something that people just say just to say it, or does it actually truly matter?
So color is one of those things that a lot of people tend to be really interested in, tend to be very concerned about picking the right color and do I like the color? And I do think there's a lot of misconceptions. People do get drawn to picking colors that they like rather than colors that are necessarily going to work. So it's very important to really be strategic in your color choices. And the reason is basically colors firstly evoke meaning. So they communicate meaning. So just think about, like, for example, the color red. When we think of the color red, what comes to mind, in my mind at least, is like danger or romance, because obviously in our society we've become kind of accustomed to see red at stop signs at Valentine's Day, for example. So that's why those kind of associations arise. And obviously, different cultures might be different, but color communicates meaning. Secondly, color evokes emotions and it sets the mood for your brand as well. Like, it's something we instantly see. We can see it and instantly see a certain color and it might evoke a certain mood or emotions in people. So for example, if we use like cooler colors like green or blue, generally they help you feel more relaxed. So you tend to see those in, for example, like in the medical industry, in dentists, things like that, because you generally want to create this like relaxed, competent image that those colors convey. Whereas, if you think about I don't know, a theme park, they're probably more likely to use something like a brighter color like red or something like that, because it's evoking more of an excitement. It's evoking that kind of excitement and anticipation around that kind of thing, what red evokes. So the other thing is colors boost brand recognition. So it's really, really important to use the same colors, being consistent with the same colors. So don't just use, red one day and then change it to blue the next day. You want to choose the colors that you really think represent your brand, choose the colors that you think really represent who you are and what's going to attract your ideal client. And these are going to essentially help you become more memorable, because people are going to keep seeing the repetition of colors and they're going to begin to identify those colors and kind of see those colors as part of your brand. And every time they see the color, it will make them think of you, even if they don't see the whole context around it. So it's really, really important to be consistent, because it really helps you become more memorable, really helps you actually leading towards that. It actually helps set you apart, because people see you, your color pop up in the feed and they kind of think, oh yeah, that's your business, because they're seeing that consistent color. So another thing is, I do see a lot of people, like I said, colour is one of those things a lot of people do get a bit confused with, and it can be very overwhelming. And for that reason, I created some time ago a quiz to really help people if they're not very confident about their colour choices or they're not sure what colours to choose. And this quiz basically helps you identify your colour personality. So it helps you discover the colours that are really going to represent your brand's unique personality. And inside it, when you take it, you will find out the character traits of your brand, which colours to use, which to avoid. So it's a really handy kind of summary of what to do with your colours. And the link for that is inspirati.com/quiz. And it is a very helpful tool if you're not confident about your colours, or you're not sure, you've got a new brand and you're not really sure what direction to go in. It can give you a bit of helpful guidance on what might be useful.
This sounds like a really great quiz. I'm actually thinking of taking it because I've got two different brands, and one of them is in the blue-green realm, and the newer one is in the black and purple realm. So I'm curious to whether I did purposely pick the blue and the green for original brand because it created calmness, and I think it was also like confidence or something. It was like a little higher level brand. And so that's why I picked the blues and the greens for it, even though purple is technically actually my favorite color. Blue is my second favorite color. So I did hopefully at least do that right back in early 2000s. But I'd love to take the quiz too, just to double check that new brand, make sure, because I had somebody else helping me with that brand. It wasn't my original idea this time. So I'd love to see if that was a good fit. So we will make sure to have that link in the show notes for those listening, because I know it's sometimes hard to remember the link. So we will have that in the show notes and in the podcast description for this one. So cool. Speaking of brand colors, we talked about some of the things that people need to do when they're new, which is like brand colors and getting your branding set. What would be your top piece of advice when it comes to branding and websites for small businesses, so that they're not, oh, there's so many things to do and I'm confused, but what would be the top few things that you think they should do first when it comes to branding and websites?
This is an interesting question, Carrie, and it could be answered in so many different ways, as there are so many different things you could be doing. But my favorite one, and it's something that the reason it's my favorite one is because it made a huge difference to me, and I do really think it is a game changer, and that is be consistent. And there's numerous different layers to what I mean by being consistent. Firstly, being consistent in how you show up. So, for example, consistently showing up on social media if you have a blog or a podcast. So not just saying, right, I mean, as you know, Carrie, you've got a podcast, you've been doing it for, I think, have you been doing it for 2 years now? So
yes, about 2 years, almost 2 years. Yeah, I was recording.
Consistency. So, and when you've been consistent on the podcast, that's how you actually, people get to trust you, get to know you, and ultimately, they want to work with you because they become to get to know you and like what you're doing. So really being consistent helps build that trust. So it doesn't matter if it's a blog, a podcast, a YouTube show or anything, but being consistent in what you're doing. And then also on social media, are you on Instagram? Are you on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever platform you're using, making sure that you're consistently posting on those the platforms that you choose. And for that reason, it's best not to actually be on too many different channels, because I see a lot of people, particularly newer in business, and they they probably set up a profile for every single social media platform that is out there, which is great. But often when we're newer in business, we often don't have the resources. We don't have a large team. We don't necessarily have the money to necessarily outsource things. So we have to kind of maybe do a lot of things ourselves initially. So that's why I always suggest really pick the channels that are going to work best for your brand. So if that's LinkedIn, because you see you've got an audience on there, or Facebook, depending on what you do, obviously will make a big difference. But pick the channel that's going to work best for you, where you see your audience are hanging out. And then you can add on more channels over time. But a big mistake that I see people do is signing up to every single channel, and then they get burnt out really quickly, because obviously we can't sustain it unless we've actually got the resources to invest. So only do things that you can actually sustain in the long term. And then as you grow your business, you grow your team, you can start to add more things on. The other thing I'll mention about consistency is, so I've mentioned it's important to be consistent and consistently show up on whatever platforms you're using. The other thing is to see consistency in a different way. It's important to be consistent in terms of, I suppose, how you're showing up. So, for example, your visual identity, the colors you use, the fonts, the image style. So obviously we've mentioned about it's important to be consistent with color, but you also want to be consistent with other elements of your visual brand. So are you using consistent fonts? Are you using a consistent image style? You want there to be like a real consistency between, because it creates a more cohesive and credible brand, basically, by being consistent. And also it helps build that recognition, as I mentioned earlier. And the other thing you want to think about with consistency in how you show up is the messaging as well. So you want to have a consistent message that you put out there. So, you know, you want to have like a consistent message and a consistent tone of voice as well. So people begin to recognize it's you because you're putting out that similar tone out there, and people are like, oh yeah, I recognize you because it sounds like you, you know, and that you can do that in many different ways to distinguish your voice. But that is important as well. And a lot of people overlook that and they focus on the visual side of things. But there's a lot of, you know, uniqueness that can come out of your messaging. And like I said, both of these are really, so having consistency in your visual identity, having consistent in your messaging is really important because it helps people easily recognize you. So when you pop up in their social media, they recognize it's you. When you, I don't know, at an event, doing something, they recognize it's you because everything aligns and feels cohesive.
Well, and I feel like as you're talking about that, it's like you're trying not to be a stranger. So like if you're not consistent, it's like you're a stranger again to them. So when we're consistent, it's like we're their friend or a familiar person to them. So I love how you describe that consistency there, because it really is helping you ultimately build trust more, because you're not multiple personality or something. You don't have different personalities. You're consistent. You're it seems familiar and friendly to you when you receive that consistency from a brand. And I also love your points of all the social media profiles and giving listeners permission to focus on, just one or two, whatever they can be consistent with. I think it's great if listeners want to get their handle reserved on the other ones, just so you at least have it reserved, but give yourself permission, like Laura said, to only focus on the one or two that you know you can be consistent with. Go ahead and reserve the other ones if you want, but don't put them in your parking lot. Put them for later when you have the time or resources to utilize those as well. And maybe you never will, but you at least have it, reserved. But giving yourself permission to not do too many things is, I think, very important. That's a very important point you made.
That's a great point as well about the reserving them, because I know actually made this mistake, because like you say, new platforms appear all the time and good names get picked up quite quickly. And obviously it's good to have consistency across all your different social media. So you can just say, I'm this name on all the different social media platforms, and it makes it a lot more complicated if you're using a different name. And if that name's no longer available, then you can't. So you better just get the names all there at the beginning, and then it makes it easier moving forward.
So I love all the points that you brought to us today. I feel like you made branding, you really broke it down, made it simpler to like conceptualize and to think about. You really helped us, figure out what are those first steps we need to do as either new business owners or maybe existing ones that need to reassess our brand. So what would be some great ways for any listeners who want to get to know you a little bit better, who want to connect with you? What are some great social media platforms, speaking of social media, that they can get a hold of you on and or your website?
Yeah, so a few ways to really. The website is inspirati.com. If you want to put that in the link in the links below, that'd be good. In terms of social media, on the website, I do have a blog as well. So if you're looking for like further resources on branding, I talk a lot about, I do talk weekly on all different topics around branding. With social media, I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. LinkedIn, you can find my name, Laura Nicole Brown. I do have a lot of resources on there. I post every week. And also Instagram, Inspirati Studios on Instagram. So yeah, I'll give you the link so you can post them in the post notes.
Yes, we'll definitely have those in the show notes as well as the podcast description. So it's easy for our listeners to find you. So thank you so much, Laura, for being on our show. I learned a lot about branding. I already knew some about it, but I learned even more from you. And I really appreciate you sharing with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me, Carrie. I've really enjoyed having a conversation. It's been so fun to talk about branding with you.
Yes. Yes. I feel like we kind of go hand in hand where you do the branding and we do the website part, implementation part. So I love it. Wasn't that such a great conversation? I know I learned even more about branding than I already knew. Laura's insight into branding really gets to the heart of what sets businesses apart. It's not just about how things look, it's about creating a brand that feels right, one that aligns with your values and truly connects with your audience. If you're rethinking your branding or building one from the ground up, I hope today's episode gives you some clarity and maybe even a little confidence to take the next step. Don't forget, you can find links to connect with Laura in the show notes and in this podcast description. And if you loved this episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a minute to follow, rate, and review the show. It really helps us reach more business owners like you who are ready to build brands and websites that truly convert. And we will see you next week.